Caroline Gaita is Executive Director of Mzalendo Trust. Good morning, Carol.
Good morning, Eric.
Good to have you in Kenya's biggest conversation.
I'm happy to be here.
Finally.
Finally.
Yes.
It's taken time, but I'm here.
As good things normally do.
Yes, yeah.
Welcome to the hot seat of
Thank you.
the conversation.
Yes.
Mzalendo Trust.
Yes.
Tell us first about it, and then we'll discuss what we want to discuss today.
Okay, so once again, happy to be here. Mzalendo Trust is Kenya's premier parliamentary monitoring organization. We keep an eye on Parliament, is the way we say it, and we facilitate public participation in the legislative affairs of the nation. We tell you how your members that you elect are performing each year, what legislative proposals they have put forward. Our work is anchored on three broad areas, and that's what we hopefully will be speaking about: on inclusion, looking at the participation and the contributions of women and the youth and persons with disability; openness, which really looks at how accessible, how public participation is facilitated within Parliament; and of course, is our work on accountability, just looking at work on Chapter 6 and how accountable Parliament is, but not just Parliament, but also government agencies to the citizens of Kenya. So
Okay.
in a nutshell, that's who we are.
Okay.
Yes.
So we are transitioning from the 12th to the 13th Parliament.
Yes, we are.
Like we've seen historically,
Yes.
every time we have an election, many members of Parliament do not make it back.
Yes.
They may take 5 years out, 10 years out, and then some of them come back.
Yeah.
But usually you'll find that somebody does not get re-elected into the next Parliament.
Yes.
Do you have the figures from the last two on the attrition rate?
So on average, the attrition rate has been between 50 and 70% in the last 2013 and 2017. We still don't have the indications or proper indications for these elections. But one of the areas that I can already begin to speak about is perhaps Central, where we are seeing that even, the parliamentary leadership that we've had in the 12th Parliament is already being kicked out of Parliament despite holding senior positions, despite being very influential, and they're already being kicked out. But again, also, we could see some of the attrition rate go down in some areas because of the yellow wave, as we are seeing, especially in Central. We're also seeing that in this election, a lot of members are transitioning to other positions. So you have MPs and senators running for governor, women reps for running for single constituency seats, women reps running for governor, and members of Parliament also running for governor. So you could see numbers leaving Parliament, but successively, vying for other positions like governors as well, and leaving the National Assembly for the Senate. Yes.
Okay.
You know, the thing that I've always found interesting with our members of Parliament
Yes.
is when you have an academic perspective of their performance and what they do, I have been alarmed to find that the electorate don't share those views.
Yeah, that is true. And as you're aware, every year we've done an annual scorecard. And part of what we are doing right now is also tracking how the best performing MPs in Parliament, the 12th Parliament, for example, are faring on in this election.
And how they fare?
And well, some, especially the women, some are MP elects. The others not necessarily. And one of the interesting thing is that the citizens don't equate the lawmaking role of MPs with their performance. So they don't look at the number of bills they have proposed, they don't look at the oversight role, and they don't look a lot on their representational role. The focus is on development, which, as the Supreme Court has ruled recently, that's not really the main focus of members of Parliament. CDF ought to never have been their key responsibilities. And yet, this and how deep their pockets are has been some of the considerations that MPs are gauged upon. We've had MPs in some cases tell us that, look, when we go back to our people, they say that we don't eat laws. So they want to wake up, come to you for bursary, come to you for funeral expenses, come to you for a church contribution. And if you don't do that, then you're not performing.
Yeah.
And yet you could be the best legislator in when it comes to the performance of your 3 key roles as a member of parliament.
But you know, the interesting thing again is the CDF and everything that pertains to it came into being long before we had county governments.
It did, yes.
And so right now when you have county governments and you could say the development has been localized, the perspective of what the MP would do, should we say, gets more clarity. Meaning you ask, but if you have a county government there, so why is the MP augmenting this? However, the thing it does point to, and this goes back to the days of President Daniel Arap Moi, the late president, what we call the district focus,
Yes.
where it was an attempt to try and bring funds to the level of the district so people could actually access the things that they consider to be important to them through, in that system, it was through the DC and so forth.
Yeah.
But when this matter was brought to the MPs, it was the same attempt. Now, the county system seems to have put on a far better structure. Now, if you look at the needs that locals present as what they consider to be fundamental to them, yes, the Supreme Court has made its pronouncement, but is it in tandem with what the citizenry actually think is their fundamental need?
Allow me to say this, and some of the challenges that you're mentioning point also to a lack of awareness on the role of the different positions, whether it's the role of county governments, the role of MPs. In 2019, there's a report that we did, Beyond the Ballot. What do citizens expect of their members of parliament? And it points to that lack of awareness. Unfortunately, the fruits of devolution as well, as we anticipated that service delivery would escalate or cascade downwards to the citizens. Citizens would understand the importance of participating, for example, in the development of county integrated plans. Citizens would be able to hold their county governments accountable. That has not happened, and the members of parliament still remain the first call, in most cases, of everyday challenges. And so you're right in the sense that perception that the MP is a first call, that perception that there are things that members of parliament ought to do. But again, looking at the way the constitution is framed, we should be seeing a shift from expectations on parliamentary representatives to expectations on county government, because that is a principle of devolution that takes service delivery to the people, address the immediate needs of citizens, proximate to where they stay. So if you are in a county, if you are in a ward, your MCA, your governor, at the core, they are the people who ought to know what challenges that are facing that region. And the MP now facilitates or helps create the enabling environment, whether it's in resourcing, whether it's on oversighting, whether it's in development of laws that address those same challenges, whether it's in addressing the petitions that you will present to Parliament. But it shouldn't be them that are giving you development funds to do what the county or the national government ought to be doing.
Consider this for a minute. Yeah?
Yes.
Here we have the people's expectations, right? And they are fairly basic. Here you have county governments, you have CDF, you have national government playing their role.
Yes.
See, yes, the citizenry may not fully understand some of the details of what these entities do, but they do understand their needs.
They do.
And the only way, in my opinion, that the citizens will understand all the wheretofores of all these entities is if they're actually functioning. For instance, people understand CDF because of the bursary element.
Yeah.
County governments also have bursaries.
Bursary schemes, yeah.
But most people don't even understand that those bursaries are there. Now, when the counties issue bursaries, then people will know. What I'm saying is, don't you think that if there was a mechanism to ensure, I'm using the word enforcement here, the roles that these entities have, and let's talk about the county government, that this understanding that the citizens lack would actually be significantly reduced.
Yes. Of course. It would be, because what you're pointing out is really a systemic malfunction. The counties don't do what they're supposed to do.
Yes.
They don't create awareness that they're supposed to do that. And therefore, we've stuck 10 years of devolution, but our citizen mentality is still stuck to where we found solutions.
Yes.
And so there's that systemic challenge. And yes, if the counties did what they're supposed to do, if the national government did what it's supposed to do, then citizens will not have those expectations of their members of parliament. But for as long as that gap remains, they will have, or they will keep being expected by their citizens to fill the role.
I say this because if you look at, there's always this comparison that people give of the West and the sort of democracy we have. The reason why their elections are not as charged as ours is because these basics are met, and the citizenry can more or less take it for granted that it will be met. So they don't need to elect a certain MP to have those things done.
They don't. And what we hope that with time, our aspirations, our wish list, as you would put it, is that we'll get to that point where the role of the MP then is to create that enabling environment, create a taxation environment that is fair to everybody, is inclusive, is broad-based, ensure that services are being delivered to the people. If it's the Senate, as you're calling your governors to the Senate and providing, you're playing your overall oversight on the counties, that then you're having these expectations of the governments. But as it is now, we are putting a band-aid on what is wrong with the system, as opposed to addressing what the challenges are. And part of what we need to do as institutions, as media, is then sensitize citizens that even as we are doing, as we are electing representatives across board, is to remind ourselves why we are electing them. What do we expect them to do when they get into office? And how will we ensure that this is done? In this election, you have seen candidates signing, pledges, making pledges, signing commitments, even at MCA level, that if I am elected, this is what I commit to do. Imagine if that was replicated across the country, and citizens said, look, when we elected you, this is what you promised to do.
But
as an MC, yes.
Even as we look at the structure and, bringing in the issue of devolution and saying that this is what is actually supposed to happen. And the members of parliament then are supposed to play a representative, an oversight and a legislative role, right? So essentially, even like we saw with the, deeming of CDF as illegal from the courts the other day, and to say that the MPs then members of parliament don't have a role, for example, in development, which is what the CDF essentially was supposed to do.
Yes.
Now, if we have that structure set up, which is when we know that devolution is supposed to be at the county level with your governors and your MCAs. Now, don't you see a situation, though, that this has been a very powerful position for members of parliament and those seeking to be members of parliament, because you hold in your hand the promise of what you can do for people. And it is upon that promise that essentially you will get yourself into office. Okay. So even as we try to debunk that, we must also then try to release this power from the hands of individuals who keep essentially, quote unquote, hoodwinking people into believing that this is actually their role in order for them to get into this position.
Of course. And remember, members of parliament have the power of the purse. They are the ones who are providing approval of budgets. And we have seen how CDF has also been used to, it's a give and take.
Negotiate with the government.
So you negotiate with Treasury. if you're not providing allocations for CDF, then we are not approving your budget. Yes. And indeed, even as we have looked at some of the drivers of the cost of politics in the country, those are some of the things, because you come in and you're expected to do things, but we also know that these things that you're doing are not necessarily coming from your pockets. And so without that fund, your bargaining power is a little less eroded. And now you have to think beyond that pocket of money to asking yourselves, what can you really offer as members of parliament? And so it would be interesting to see how that would play out in the 13th parliament. But we anticipate that obviously amongst the first order of business. And we've actually seen one of the members of parliament come out and say that what the Supreme Court actually declared illegal is the Constituency Development Fund as it was prior to devolution. And now they have a national government,
which is not
CDF,
for parliament.
which is not, and we know also that women representatives also have their GAF fund. So it's a powerful tool. I don't anticipate that it will be easy to really let go of it. And so I assume that there'll be efforts to come up with other formations of something similar. And we've seen even MCAs, ward development
They also
funds.
want the ward development fund and how to work with it. I think we all need to just take a step back and listen to what we as Kenyans are saying. Get out of the boardrooms and look at, just like you said, when you go to the constituency, what is it that constituents view as the job that they ought to, the service that they ought to get from their member of parliament, from the elected leaders from top to bottom. They want the president to build roads. They want the MP to build roads. They want the governor to build roads. They want the MCA to build roads. They want the senator to build roads. The woman rep build roads. So this is what people expect of their leaders. Can we just take a step back and then ask ourselves, okay, so how do we then address this need? Plus the other things that we feel that members of parliament should also be focusing on. Because this is it. People in Mount Kenya have been complaining that, this Uhuru man has not, look at our coffee, look at our tea, look at our roads, look at our...
You forgot to look at our milk.
Look at our milk, all those things.
Where I come from, Githunguri, look at our road. It's terrible.
There you go.
Those are some of the things that
And they're
looking
blaming
at
Uhuru.
and thinking about, infrastructure development elsewhere. But,
Our
to
road
go to
in
our
Githunguri.
main road is
And yet your
terrible.
road in Githunguri is
Yes.
not a Kenha road.
No, it's
right?
yeah,
So it should be asking Nyoro, your governor,
that's true.
to address the issue of the road. Look at the people of Embakasi. Is it East or Babu Owino's constituency? East. So how did you rate Babu Owino's performance in the 12th Parliament?
So the good thing is that our performance rating for members of parliament is really just pegged on their role as espoused in the
legislators.
constitution as
Those
legislators.
three:
Yeah.
representation,
So we don't,
oversight, legislation.
Exactly. So we don't look at the
Everything
development
else.
angle.
Uh-huh.
But
How was he scoring?
not bad. Not bad.
Not
Yes,
bad.
Yes.
So you were seeing that did he move any bills in Parliament?
Yes. But I would have to think of which specific ones.
And he stood to contribute
So,
to debates in Parliament.
Especially the contributions to debates in Parliament, because our scorecard is anchored on the plenary contributions as they happen. But we also look at the legislative proposals, especially when we also look at it from an angle of youth and women. Yeah. We also do a special spotlight on those two, just to highlight and to debunk the perception that they don't do well or don't put in any proposals in Parliament.
If you go to Embakasi East, and the people of Embakasi East have spoken loudly about Babu Owino,
Yes.
and you ask them, those things that you're talking about are not what has made them re-elect him.
Yes.
It is what he's done on the ground.
Absolutely.
Okay? So yes, he's been able to do this and the other, but he's also a very good lobbyist.
Yes.
So we need infrastructure in this area. He knows where to go, which doors to knock on, and to bring the infrastructure project on the ground. So how do we then balance these two? This is what the people are looking for. We want our MP to come and sort out our roads, to sort out our insecurity, to do our markets. Same thing we want our governor to do, same thing we want our MCA to do. And yet here we are all sitting and saying, MP has the 3 RAL.
And that's the thing, that the representation, it's upon then the member of parliament to know which doors, because you've said it, Babu knows which doors to knock, to lobby. And so as a member of parliament, the citizen expects you to be the buffer between your government and their needs. So it's you who needs to then know which doors to knock, address the petition that the citizens are bringing to you in parliament, speak to the cabinet secretary, or whether it's in charge of agriculture, or present a bill that would address some of the challenges that they are facing, and then hope that this then translates into better
actual work done
services and actual work done for citizens. It shouldn't be you who then says that, look, the national government is not doing the roads in my constituency. I need to look for the money to do the roads. Because what's happening now is that we are letting so many organs or agencies off the hook because someone is having to step in to do that which they should not be doing. But if the member of parliament understands their role is to facilitate and to be the link between the citizens and their needs, if the county government understands that it's their responsibility to provide the functions as they are devolved, and the national government as well, and the member of parliament, and we see that a lot, we always see members of parliament, rising in the house to ask questions, to ask for answers from certain departments, and that's as the way it should be. But it shouldn't be that the member of parliament has to go back into their pockets to fix schools or to fix, and yet the Ministry of Education, which has the responsibility for national level education, has the same resources for education for
and
schools,
takes the lion's share of the budget
allocated to them.
Are we going on to a break?
Yes, we are. 27 minutes to 8. We are having a conversation with Caroline Gaita. She is the Executive Director of Mzalendo Trust. Looking forward into the 13th Parliament and what we expect. So we are seeing new MPs being announced across the country. We are seeing old MPs being re-elected. How do we expect the 13th Parliament to perform? Let's also look at how did the 12th Parliament actually perform. We had very many complaints, even on this show, on, but this 12th Parliament, Msema Kweli is here. She'll tell us whether we were right. Let's take a break, take a look at the traffic and the weather, reminding you that, yes, we voted. Now we are seeing the results being announced. We've got to maintain peace. Elections melanoma is not just about casting the ballot. It's about the entire process. We are still in the process. Good morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Our guest this morning, Caroline Gaita, Executive Director of Mzalendo Trust, looking ahead to the 13th Parliament. City, you wanted to ask Carol something?
Yes. What I wanted to what I wanted to ask was this. I'm actually trying to
remember.
Not remember. To reorganize my mind. The time
Perhaps it was a comment.
the time I wanted to ask, it was clear in my mind. And then other thoughts have now encumbered that thought. But this is what I was going to say. If I look at what it is that people expect of their leaders, it is representative of certain African traditions that we've had for the longest time. So I'm wondering, can legislation change such expectations? Can people look at leaders in a way that is different, or in the way, say, the West look at their leaders? Or is it that maternalistic or paternalistic perspective that somebody who's in a position of authority is somebody who should actually help you and who should assist you and provide solutions for you?
It can't change that. And I think the truth of the matter is that those expectations, of assistance, of taking care of certain things within the community, sometimes are not only expected of the members of parliament. If you hold a certain position, whether in private or public sector, whether you're a church leader, there are certain expectations that people have of you, perhaps from that communal aspect. But the higher up you seem also to be in the food chain within that community, the higher the expectations people have of you. So perhaps then what we should be asking ourselves is, should that communal expectation of the member of parliament be the yardstick against which we measure their performance, or should we have that as a social expectations, but when it comes to the ballot, really gauge them against how they performed as their role as MPs. But that obviously is very difficult because citizens don't have
Let me ask.
time to do that.
What do we use to vote? Is it our heads? Is it our stomachs? Is it our emotions? What is it that we use of ourselves? What is that drives our voting process?
Is that the question or the answer?
No, I'm asking you. I'm asking the question because, I mean, it's not as though I have an answer. But
we always say that, we always, we keep hoping for an improved process as we move along, right? And so we've been voting on what can you do for me, all right, as an elected leader. But our goal and aspiration is that we will get to that point where we can ask, what have you done for the country? What have you done for the constituency in relation to what is expected of you? But there are so many things that you're right that come into play. How generous are you? How have you performed? Recently, I was in a conversation and someone was talking about their MCA, and they were saying that, look, this guy, we elected him. This is his second term, and the road within the church, just even access where he goes for church is yet to be done. And, for them, that was criminal enough to make sure that he's not going to be re-elected. But it will take some time to shift. But in some cases, you can see that shift is happening or might happen, but it requires, we can't expect that shift to just be from, the members. It's some sort of a communal shift. But I think the bigger shift needs to be a deepening of understanding of the expectations of the different arms of government.
I think the shift needs to be with those who claim to understand, to actually understand what the people want.
That's what I was
The people want those things. That thing of a
and
road,
those
blah,
people,
blah,
and
blah,
exactly,
blah.
but if they understand those things, that the people who are supposed to deliver should. And if they don't deliver, then people who should know who to hold accountable. I think that's the argument I'm trying to make.
Okay.
That don't hold your member accountable or responsible for something that they are not supposed to be doing.
How did we get away from this grain in the first place? As per what was established for members of parliament to do, and then what has been set aside via devolution, then for county government to do. How did we move from that? Or was it never ever practiced? It may have been on paper, as it were, but it was never something that was in practice. Or did we stray away?
That speaks generally to challenges that we have as a country, that we have very good things on paper, but the implementation of them is where the challenge lies. And so we've moved to a devolved function of government, but in terms of understanding and expectations, we've not devolved our expectations.
Can you say the same thing then, again, for members of parliament themselves? People who are getting into the 13th parliament, we're looking at them coming in one by one through the day to day. Do you think that they have a fundamental inherent understanding of what a member of the National Assembly is supposed to do? Because there are many who stood up on podiums during campaign time and said, yes, we will build your road, we will do what? And they're coming into the 13th parliament. Do they have an understanding of what they themselves ought to be doing?
They could, or maybe most of them don't, and that's where the induction programs come in. But remember also, they're also then playing to the same psyche of the citizens, because that's what citizens want to hear.
Exactly.
And so those are the promises that you make. But then you come in and you can't fulfill any of those promises that you made, because it was never your responsibility.
Yeah.
And so you can't say that you're promising things, but that's not your responsibility. And so the person or the unit that is supposed to deliver those, they don't. And come 5 years, you made these promises. You didn't deliver. Can you leave?
Can you divorce?
Can we try someone else?
Can you divorce the citizen from this expectation? specifically members of parliament?
No, you can't for as long as those gaps exist. Until we get to the point where those basic needs are being met, they will continue to have those expectations.
I think we shouldn't even.
Yeah.
The point is, let the people continue expecting. When a constituent expects to see a road done, and they know they've elected MCA,
Yes.
governor, woman rep, senator, MP, president, they expect service.
Yes.
Now, everybody who's been elected has a role to play on this road getting done. That's a
That's
point.
true,
That's
yeah.
a bottom line. If it's member of parliament with the oversight role and with the power to make budget, you are the ones who actually approve how much money goes to the counties.
Exactly.
You should be using that power that you have and the tool that you have to say, okay, why are we sending money for devolution and it's not being accounted for? I'm a member of parliament for Nairobi County. I'm one of the 17 MPs in Nairobi. I'm not going to vote for this county
Revenue
allocation because I have not seen how that money is helping my constituents in that county. If we start pushing it from that angle, then even it comes down. But for as long as you are not, you say, unajua hii bill imekuja, unajua lazima tupitishe, sababu tusipopitisha county zitakuwa na pesa. You're not playing the oversight role properly.
No, you're not. And for as long as you're not interrogating those budgetary allocations and seeing, so you have a budgetary allocation for education, what's the quality of schools in your constituency? Have you reached out to the CS for education? What's the quality of markets in your constituency? What's the county government doing? And so if you have that, if we have everyone playing their role as you have put it, then the citizen doesn't really care who is doing what. All they want to see is service delivery. And so the point is to make sure that these 6 offices that we are voting for are working in tandem to fulfill citizen needs, because the reason you have 12 million people going to the votes is because they have certain expectations. They don't care about the bureaucracy. They don't care about the demarcations of responsibilities and roles. All they want is those basic needs that they have said they want in this election.
One of the things that MPs do in this country, as we've heard people say, we have a budget-making parliament. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, the one consistent complaint, and we have had our share of it in this studio, is one where budgets are made for things that we need as a country, and then the debt ceiling just keeps going beyond the ceiling.
Yes.
Okay, now, that has a net effect on the entire citizenry because the government that comes in through their beloved agent called KRA, and before you know it, you're being taxed for literally everything. Now, when we elect our MPs, do the citizens even think and say, these are the people who are clearly responsible, these heavy taxes that we're paying? I think not.
No, we don't. And that lack of connection between, I've always said, the lack of connection between citizens' everyday lives, beyond those basic immediate needs at the constituency level, to the macro, the taxation, the cost of living, the cost of health, the cost of education. There seems to be a disconnection between how citizens perceive those things. It's like these things are packed somewhere in a certain office and don't have, they're not, the members of parliament don't have a role to play or to ensure that public debt, cost of living, and so even when it comes down to what are the expectations? No one will go back and say, no, I am voting you out because you voted to increase the debt ceiling to 10 trillion. I am voting you out because when we needed more money for NHIF, you voted no. I am voting out because when we were discussing, increased allocations or subsidies to fuel, you voted yes as opposed to voting no. So we are not there yet. But in some cases, we do see, especially as part of the work we do as Mzalendo Trust, we do see a lot of people coming to us and asking, how did my member of parliament vote on this. What contributions did they make? But that's a very small percentage of what I would call woke citizens, and unfortunately that's not the rest of the country. So again, pointing out to the work that we also have to do as civil society organizations. Yeah.
You know, there's also this issue of the fickle nature of human beings, where irrespective of how good a performance an MP may have put in place, people get to a point where they want to change. And it has nothing to do with how well you've done. They just want change. And you don't represent change. You represent the thing they don't particularly want. Now, the question I want to ask is, as I look at this, do you think that people who vie for political positions of necessity understand, they may not talk about it, but they understand that the only way they retain the relevance they have is to ensure that they never actually quite fulfill the mandate, so that people always have a desire to have that mandate fulfilled, but it's never really fulfilled. I know it's conspiracy, but
is it? Is it that you keep ensuring that your hands are open, so that those come with those with the begging bowl have to always come into you, and therefore you remain relevant. Not far-fetched, but I want to believe that a lot of those that offer themselves to serve do so for other reasons, like service.
That's what they all say.
Yes.
There are people who are looking for power for power's sake.
Yes.
There are people who may be coming into this for service, but there are the people who just...
But maybe the way to answer that question is to look at what our politics is now. It's the means to great ends. It's a winner takes all. It's the quickest route to a better life. And so the inspirations and the, to run for office are not necessarily what it was before.
Yeah.
We did some interesting work around cost of politics and the drivers of cost of politics. And one of the things that was coming out, besides the fact that Kenya has one of the highest cost of politics in the region, is the fact that whereas before, when we were growing up, the people who would be running for office, would be teachers, would be doctors, would be your church leaders who want to serve in a different capacity. Right now, they can't even compete because one, the deep pockets, and the deeper the pockets, the more likely you are to get elected. You get elected and then you can fatten the wallet more. So our costs of politics keeps increasing. And so maybe that answers the question that it's not necessarily service, but we've made our political offices very attractive.
Actually, we've made it commercial.
And commercialized it, yes. And one of the things that, for example, in these elections, that is interesting to see is that we're also seeing, for example, certain, and we've seen it from the past, if you have legal issues, you run for office.
Yep.
Now we are seeing if you also have business issues,
You run for office.
So what if you have been in county government, you've been a governor, we're also seeing them running to come back to the Senate. And the question that we want to ask ourselves, what does that mean for oversight? So holding office also becomes a protective mechanism, if you ask me.
So it comes with other things.
Yeah.
As you're speaking, we are watching KTN News, and they're live in Kasarani. The CEO of SportPesa, Captain Ronald Kanauri, has just been declared the winner of that MP seat. Yes, that's in Kasarani. He was running on an independent ticket. Captain Ronald Karauri wins the Kasarani MP seat, the CEO of SportPesa. You've got to remember his father was a long-time member of Parliament and assistant minister as well. Yep. So let's talk about the performance of the 12th Parliament for the remaining 4 minutes. How do you rate it if you look at 12th versus 11th versus 10th?
Low, So the performance was not as good as the 11th. And when we did our scorecard based on different parameters, the number of bills that were passed, the bills themselves that were eventually passed, the debates, and the quality of contributions. There seems to have been a lower performance compared to the 11th Parliament. And one of the things that I could also say about the 12th Parliament is, and even from our scorecard, despite the, separation of powers, the power of Parliament, it seemed to cede too much, become so subservient to the executive. And so even when we did our analysis of the bills that were passed, a lot of these were, in relation to the Big Four agenda, and not necessarily to the issues that were facing the country, or the bills that would be transformative. So you have a lot of bills that were touching, for example, on corruption, public participation, health, that didn't see light of day. We had a record 28 bills lapse, a lot of petitions presented that did not see light of day. And so, but again, also, we have to understand, and we did this in 2021 when we released our scorecard, this was also the first Parliament to legislate in a pandemic. And part of what we then saw was a Parliament, just like the others globally, trying to adjust to a different way of working, to a remote way of working, meaning that quite a number of members would not be in the House for almost a prolonged period of time because of either age or illness limitation. So it came with its own challenges, and factoring all those in really didn't match up to the performance of the 11th Parliament. But we also saw this House, in terms of course, it had a higher number of women, and we've seen them make certain, legislative proposals, and we are seeing, quite a number of those ones, Martha Wangare, Lesuda, Millie Odhiambo, all getting re-elected. And when we look at our scorecard,
they performed well.
They performed well.
Okay. A good thing. Let's wait and see how the 13th Parliament will then perform. As Mzalendo Trust, is your expectation that if this Parliament does not meet the 2/3 gender threshold, it should be resolved immediately?
So we undertook some exercise last week where we were calling a scenario anticipation of the 13th Parliament, and there are certain areas that we anticipate this 13th Parliament will have to deal with immediately. Of course, one is the issue of the dissolution of Parliament. There's an understanding that dissolution related to the 12th Parliament, so a new court intervention may need to be sought. But part of the other things that we anticipate will inform the 13th Parliament, of course, around the CDF and the court ruling. We've seen concerns about this wash members of Parliament coming to, and how that means, no less from the CS. We are tracking the women and the youth that will come into the House. We are tracking the issue of governors joining Senate and what that means for oversight. And then finally, of course, we've talked about the business protection and how that will, all these MPs who are coming in with issues, but most importantly on the oversight role, because you've had issues where people have cases, they come and join PAC and expect to be oversighting the same institutions with whom they are in court.
Yes.
Thank you.
Caroline will be calling you a lot during the first and second and third and fourth and fifth year of this 13th Parliament. Let's work together with Mzalendo Trust and keeping track of how the 13th Parliament will be performing.
Thank you. Thank you very much.